with a vision to bridge the gap between curious minds and professionals from the industry, and to make HR College a pioneer in industry education pan India.
It is my pleasure to introduce our principal in charge, Ms. Pooja Ramchandani, who has been a constant support to our club's vision. For her, every student has always been the brand ambassador of HR College, which in itself brings immense confidence and motivation among us. Due to some inconvenience, she cannot join today, but she is wished regards.
I would also like to introduce our Vice Principal, Dr. Naveen Punjabi, who is not only energetically passionate, but also an education enthusiast with a vision to ignite minds and to awaken hearts. If our Vice Principal is present here.
Kushi, please go ahead.
Okay. So he is not available right now. So Mehak, please go ahead.
I would also like to welcome our faculty advisor, Professor Rahul Mishra, our beacon of light and a true mentor who is always there to guide us, to oblige us with a few words of encouragement. Is he here?
No,
Okay,
actually,
we
there
can.
is some problem, so we can move ahead.
Okay. Now I would love to introduce you, our speaker, Mr. Chinmay Ingole, a credit risk manager and portfolio risk officer at Citibank, an ex-portfolio analyst at JP Morgan Chase and Company with a demonstrated history of working in financial services. He's an experienced young professional with years of expertise in the field of finance.
With this, we move forward and turn it over to a wonderful speaker today so you can all enjoy the wealth of knowledge he has to share with you. You can post your queries or doubts in the chat box. And I would like Chinmay sir to please introduce.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that introduction, Kushi and Mehak. It's nice to have everyone here, such a large participation, especially on a Saturday evening. I'm sure a lot of us would have had a heavy meal, so it's difficult to be on such sessions. I'll try to keep it interactive. We have question and answer sessions at the end, but I would pose some questions in between just to get it interactive and make it more interesting. So about me, as you've been introduced, I've been working in global banks for a couple of years now. I've also done certifications throughout the period. MBA is something I started with, and then went on to complete CFA, FRM, CIRA, Six Sigma, and a couple of more. I don't want to bore you with those details, but the fact that all of you are here is encouraging. I'm thrilled to see such a large audience to be interested in such this topic. This topic is interesting. I am sure a lot of us would have heard of these brands that we are going to talk about, interacted with them. Now, before we start, I just want to get the background here. How many of us have ordered food from Zomato? Yeah,
Most of us.
most of us, right? That's. I mean, it's a kind of obvious question, but we got Zomato got into news very recently because of the IPO that it has come up with. I think a couple of weeks ago, it's in public now, so the shares are traded. Even if you missed buying shares of Zomato through the IPO, or you didn't get the allotment, you can still buy now. Now, whether Zomato is a good company to buy the shares of. When you're buying shares, you're actually becoming a part owner of the company. So whether Zomato's shares are good to buy, and if yes, as a business model, is it good to be part of? And if yes, what should be the price of it? That's a question. Now, I remember when I was in college, Zomato was something that was new, was not known earlier, right? People were always ordering food by calling the restaurant, "Bhaiya do chai bhej dena" and stuff. But we didn't have an app where it was totally faceless. and you can order before maybe a decade ago. Zomato started in 2010, and when I was in college, it was still a, a new idea. People didn't know whether it's going to work or not. In fact, I remember having a debate in my college with our professors who said that one of the guys, very experienced, veteran in this field, corporate finance, has been part of a couple of IPOs, very strong and very big IPOs. And this guy makes a statement that Zomato, a company like Zomato, or rather any of these tech startups, will never be successful. Or rather, the word he used was profitable. He's yet to be proved wrong. We'll see some numbers in due course. He's yet to be proved wrong because Zomato, Paytm, these guys are not profitable yet. But whether they are successful or not, that is something totally different question. Now, if you look at these companies, we have had multiple IPOs in first and second quarter of this year. That's partially due to very few IPOs in 2020, so that backlog is getting filled up now. Now, if you look at traditional companies, let's say a company like L&T or Tata Power or Reliance, they make something, either purchase some raw material, make something, process it, and then sell it with a profit margin, and that's how their business works. Zomato, Paytm, InMobi, Nykaa, even Amazon and Flipkart for that matter, they don't make anything for most part. They have they just work as an intermediary. Now, if we think about them, none of these companies in India have any profits to show. They're just burning money. So, in a way, what my professor had said, and these guys are industry veterans, right? They would say that these companies cannot make money. These are the guys who have lived through the dot-com bubble in 2000, early 2000. They've seen those dot-com companies, whatever we see, America Online, Yahoo, Google, Microsoft, AOL, and numerous of them. They had seen how a lot of them, dozens of companies would get listed every month on US stock exchanges. They would have multiple $1 million of valuations, and they would 90% of them failed in early 2000. That was the dot-com bubble crash, as they call it. Now, these are the guys who could say, and this is the exact sentence, I'm not exaggerating, this is what he said, ये बाल मैंने धूप में पका के नहीं सफेद किए. That was the experience he had. 50% of the guys in my college could say that. Rest of the 50% couldn't because they didn't have any hair left. So that's a different story. But times are such that we are changing. The situation is changing. Before we actually talk about these companies, if I ask you, all of us have heard about the Aesop's fable, the stories, child book stories, Panchatantra stories, Akbar Birbal stories, right? Zomato is also a story. Now I'd like to start a screen share where I could present my screen. Let me just see if I can do that. Okay, can we see?
Yes.
All right, now we have something to look at rather than only looking at my face. How much would you pay for these storybooks? $5, $10, $100. If it's printed on glossy paper, really nice printing, maybe $150, $200, right? What if I was to give you the rights? Every time somebody hears an Arabian Night story, it becomes your story. You're the owner of the story. There's no monetary value that you can put there, right? Or about these paintings, right? This is one of the wings from the Louvre Museum in France. The worth of the paintings that we see here, yeah. So these paintings could be worth millions. Nobody can put a value on them. They're traded. There are people who would pay money for them, but there's no fixed value. The point that I'm trying to put here is the valuation, the value of anything depends in our mind. Beauty lies in the eyes of beholder. Valuation lies with the valuator, the buyer and the seller. Basically, it's the cost, is the price at which a willing and informed buyer and seller are agreeing to trade at. So valuation is not a single solid concept. It's not like law of physics where you add 2 plus 2, you always get 4. You push something, you always get an equal and opposite reaction. It's equal of an art than of a science. It's not only maths. Just because you have a very, very, very detailed Excel model to come up at a value doesn't mean that you are accurate. You could be far from accurate. You can always be 100% inaccurate. You can have a 100 sheets Excel model, but still be 100% inaccurate. The core idea here is to understand that nobody can wrong. Nobody can be 100% right. Everybody can be wrong, and even the largest investors, the biggies of these industry that you would have heard of, they acknowledge this and they keep a margin of error, a safety margin, whatever name they might give it, to their valuation numbers. They'll always come up with a range. They'll always come up with what is the margin of error, what is the lowest price, what is the highest price, and such things. So if we cannot put value on these companies or these concepts, these work of arts, how can we put value on these companies? Now, if you look at these companies, these names here, I'm sure we would be familiar with a lot of these. MobiKwik, Grofers, Delivery, Zomato, Paytm, Nykaa, Policybazaar. InMobi may be a different one because it's not into B2B. It's into advertisements on your cell phones. Those ads you see during the games or during videos, it's something into that, and it's more of B2C business. B2B, business to business rather than business to consumer. So we don't see this name a lot, but others are definitely familiar. Now, if you look at the valuations, these are all unicorn. A unicorn is any company which has a valuation of more than 1 billion US dollar. MobiKwik is small at this stage, but rest of them are. And let that sink in. None of these companies are profitable. None of these companies can be profitable next year. People who are putting money, and these are not people like you and me. These are the people who are the big shots who've been working in this field for life. They've been doing this analysis. They know this company is not going to generate profit next 3 years, 4 years. Still, they are willing to put $1 billion behind them. It's not like they have actually put $1 billion. It's the valuation, right? It's just like a painting. And when Leonardo paints something, it's not like he has actually bought material worth $1 million. If its painting is getting sold for 1 million, or MF Hussain, his painting has been sold for 1 million. It's not like he's used a gold plated canvas or something which is worth 1 billion, 1 million, whatever. It's the value that the buyer perceives. Look at these numbers. Now, 1 billion may not be relatable. It's a very, very big number. If you look at the amount in rupees crores, these are 1 billion is approximately 7,500 crores, looking at current conversion rate. 7,500 crores. Tremendous amount of money. What makes these companies be worth so much? They have no profits. They have nothing to show as of now. In fact, if you look at the profits of the largest two players, Zomato and Paytm, one of the biggest companies. Paytm 2.1 billion, Zomato 1.2 billion, 9,000 crores, 6,000 crores. Uh, do we have some noise? Any disturbances? Okay, got it. I think they got the signal. Right. So Paytm, these are loss, right? Net losses the last 3 years. 4,000 crore, 3,000 crore, 1,700 crores. Zomato, 100 crores is what they reported in 2018, 2,300 crores last year. And this was the year which was, which was supposed to be the best, right? Everybody is at home. Everybody was ordering online. That's the maximum they could have got. Lockdown was lifted after June, July. Right? Hotels, restaurants, quick service restaurants, they were open. They lost only 3 or 4 or 5 months of business maximum. It was more than made up in the remaining 6, 7 months. This was one of the best years. In fact, if you look at Zomato's numbers, they are losing 20, 21 rupees per order. And yet, their CEO, their chief operating officer, wants to increase their number of orders by 20% next year, 20 to 30% next year, even though they're losing 20 rupees per order. Totally berserk, totally nonsense, if you ask me. But it still falls into place because for two reasons. First is we've had example of the biggest and the grandest of the companies, Amazon. It started in 1997, went public in I think 2001 or sometime around that. So at the heat of that dot-com bubble, it was not profitable when it went public. And by went public, I mean the IPO came out, right? If any of these terms are not familiar, if you're not very comfortable with these terms, drop these comments in the chat box. I may not be able to see it while on screen share, but we'll come to them at the end of it. Right? So don't hesitate. We have we have people from all the backgrounds, as I understand. It's fine if you don't know these terms. I did not know them in my college. A lot of them, something I've built up afterwards. So it's fine. Just a note here, in Mobi, it's getting listed in US, not in India. Rest of the companies have plans to get listed in next 1 year or so on Indian stock exchanges, NSE or BSE. And that's why we see this huge number, right? 12 billion, 15 billion, because they are getting valued in US dollars already. This is other companies are getting valued in Indian rupees and then getting converted to US dollars. It's a slight difference, but that doesn't change the point that we have NASSCOM suggested we might have 50 unicorns, 50 companies with more than 1 billion valuation at the end of this year, and maybe 5 to 10 decacons. Decacon is companies with more than 10 billion valuation, like in Mobi. Really, really out of the sky number. I cannot even imagine what would that money look like, that kind of money look like if I had to count it. If I was given that amount of cash, maybe I would have to take a truck to carry those currency notes. So what happens in these stages is these companies, these are all startups. These are the stages of startups. We'll talk about them in briefly. I want to relate this academic learning that we have had with the news events that we are seeing, the terms that we will be using in industry once you pass out and start working some industry. So trying to bridge that gap. These terms are not something that you'll see in your curriculum or in textbook. Some of the terms, I mean, these terms, the IPO valuation of startup companies was not done when the textbooks were written, so they couldn't be covering these stuff. Now, as I said, Amazon was not profitable for at least 3 to 4 years after it got listed. Tesla was not profitable, did not make any profits for a couple of quarters after it got listed. Same is the story with Zomato. People believe, the investors believe in the story. they're just burning cash. If we ask the professors, older professors or industry veterans, they would say these are only burning cash. Where are they getting this cash from? From these three stages, three, four stages. What is the purpose of doing it? They are building a story. They are preparing the market. Whether it is Zomato and online food delivery, whether it is Uber and an online taxi service, whether it is Airbnb and or Oyo in India, uh, and online hotel booking, they are not selling a service right now. They are burning money, burning cash to prepare a market, to prepare a mindset. 10 years ago, I couldn't imagine, or our parents could not imagine ordering a taxi, right? We might have some rickshawala or taxiwala who was very familiar, so might have taken their number, but that was a rare case. He would go down there, wait for an auto rickshaw or taxiwala to wait. He would say no 10 times, and then we would wait for some more. We'll cross the road from here to there. It was a hassle. Nobody could imagine that this could be done. So the money that these guys are burning is to prepare a market. As of now, I know a lot of us, especially outside Mumbai, where the public transport is not so good. Taxi and rickshaw services do not follow the meters. They have like anything, they can charge anything they want. Uber has created a mindset where people wouldn't even dare stepping outside, wouldn't even imagine stepping outside without booking a cab on their mobile. That's the idea. So they are burning cash not to make profits, but to create a market. This is a blue ocean strategy. They are creating the market first and then selling the product. Having said that, they are not the monopolies. It's not that the only one who are doing this. Flipkart is a strong competitor of Amazon. Zomato has a strong competitor, Swiggy. I think we have a question. Adit, is that a recent hand you have raised or was it from earlier?
Would you be willing to take questions now, or would it be at the end of the session?
I think we can take it at the end of the session since we mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, cool.
Anything that you're not following here? Maybe I can take one question for now.
No, I just had a query. I just wanted to get your insight.
Yeah,
on
go ahead. Just we can take one now.
As you were talking about how the valuations of these companies, these loss-making companies, have reached sky levels, and it almost seems nonsensical, right? And the only basis for this would be that they're pricing in future growth at the current stage, and that's the only way they're justifying these valuations, that
Right.
they're capturing the market. After a certain point of time, they might turn profitable. But don't you feel that the risk is not being adequately priced in at the same time? Because this is reminiscent to what happened, like you mentioned, the IT bubble in 1998 to 2000. People were pricing in future growth, but no one adequately priced in the risk, and then the bubble eventually burst. So do you think that there are some parallels between what happened back in 1998 and what's happening right now?
Well, I wouldn't say it an exact parallel, but you're absolutely spot on when you're saying we are not able to price the risk. And that's why these guys come into picture, right? Let's talk about these. And I hope when we cover this area, you might be able to get the answer.
Cool. Thank you.
Right. So when a company starts, right, it starts from an idea. Right. Zomato started, they just scanned the menus of different hotels around their locality and put them on the website. That was how they started. Because one of their office parties, one of their colleagues who ordered food for their office parties, uh, did not like the food. They complained about it. It was not a good experience. So they started with that. There were other points that, other difficulties, pain points that led to starting Oyo or Flipkart or Amazon or anyone. But the idea starts with an idea. Right? A company, all of these startups, they're starting with an idea. At that idea stage, it's a germ, it's a seed that is being conceptualized. At this stage, let's say if I have an idea, I am not thinking about $1 billion company at this stage. I'm just trying to work around, put my money and time into building a website, doing market research, maybe buying some data, reaching out people to get market survey and everything. I collect money from my parents, friends. I chip in some of my savings, friends and family kind of thing. That's bootstrapping stage where we start the company. Then at a seed stage, when I'm somewhat clear about what I want to do, where does the gap lie, what is the scope of my company. Maybe if I'm let's talk about 2010 when Zomato was in this stage. They are trying to understand how much would be their market, what could be the growth, what would be their target customer, what would be their back end logistic, everything. The seed is getting planted. So what we have is a seed money. There are no specific stages between these dots, right? There are no boundaries demarcated except for the last one. There is no set boundary that you cannot say, okay, this particular company has crossed a 10 million valuation. So now we cannot have angel investor. We can only have VC investor. It's not like that. It's a very thin area. It's a very translucent area. The idea is when the company is still in idea stage, we have seed money. We have some companies, we have some e-cells, entrepreneurship cells in colleges, IIT and the government initiated cells. They give maybe 5 lakh, 10 lakh, small amounts to find out the market potential, uh, do the operational research of your idea and stuff. That's the seed money that they get in. Then we have angel investors. Angel investors is when you have actually identified the market growth. Sorry. Okay, that may be a disturbance. So angel investors are the people who put in money. Once the idea has been conceptualized, you've identified what is your market, how you're going to reach them, what is your growth potential, and it's more of a solid idea. It's not just on paper. You've started developing an app, maybe. You've started developing an website. You've reached out to market participants, to clients, to customers, and seen what is their interest. So that is your angel participation. Next, we have VC and PE rounds. You might have heard a lot of companies have a VC round, the venture capital round or private equity rounds. They will pump in money to grow the company from an idea stage to an operational stage at different stages, right? It could be a very, very nascent stage where, let's say, Zomato was catering only to Gurgaon area. One VC investor came in, they saw potential and they put in money. Maybe they put in 5 lakhs to cover the expenses, rent the office, pay the office boy, pay for the computers and printers. That's the kind of money we're talking about in the first round. Angel and VC investors, first round of VC investors. As they keep on growing, for example, Oyo, it's into billions now. It is expanding into multiple countries. It is building up their infrastructure. It is at a very, very strong data collection center, the customer relationship center. And they're still not profitable. So the money that they're burning now, it's all from the angel and VC investors. These are funds like private equity funds for high net worth clients, high net worth individuals who have a couple of 100 crores with them, who can take a chance if the company fails. So these are the people you are talking about, right? We have SoftBank, which collects money from this source. We have many hedge funds. These are all these are all funds who collect money from rich people, rich, like ultra rich people who might be driving Bentley. No, Mercedes is what something they would gift their 18-year-old kid as a starting car. These are the kind of people we are talking about. These guys are okay to take risk. And coming to your question that we had, if we had 10,000 ideas in bootstrapping stage, maybe 5,000 or maybe 1,000 will take the angel investors. Out of 10,000 ideas that are floated in the market, only 1,000 of them will reach the angel investor stage. Maybe 100 will get VC fundings, 3 will see an IPO coming in. That's the scale we are looking at. So risk is not in how much is no, whether the valuation should be $10,000 or $20,000 or $10 billion. Risk is here, right? You put money in 100 companies, maybe 5, 10 will survive and be profitable. That's how the VC funds and PE funds operate. They know 80% of their investment will be zero in 5 years, but the 20% which do survive, they will give 5x, 10x, 100x returns to cover up for the losses from rest 80, 90% and make huge ton of money, more than your mutual funds and stuff, to keep attracting money, keep attracting healthy cash flows from the from the high net worth individuals, right? So risk is kind of considered here. Whether the share price is $40 or $50 or 70 rupees, 100 rupees, that's again, it's a story. We'll see about how it goes. People who are investing in it, they are aware that this may be a far-fetched valuation. We might see this company fail, but all you can do is put your money in different basket. In fact, in case of Zomato, the company which on India side, which is the promoter, or rather the one of the largest shareholders, is Info Edge India. I'm sure all of you have heard of this company. If not the company, the products that they have. Naukri.com, IIMjobs, Jeevansathi.com, and 99 Acres, a lot of them. I'm sure you have heard of those websites. They have again started investing in multiple companies and grown those brands either organically through their efforts or by just buying out at some stage, being an investor at a later stage, acting as a VC investor at some stage. IPO is when either one of these investors exit by selling it to different investor or to the public, right? That's the exit or IPO stage. IPO is when the company goes public. Investors like you and me, retail investors who don't get a Mercedes on their 18th birthday, but probably will get a bike, can invest here after the company becomes public. Now, next part I want to cover is how do these companies arrive at valuation? How do these companies think it's a 10 billion valuation, 15 billion valuation? This company got Series B funding, Series C funding. So it's like one after the other. Venture capitalist comes in, a fund comes in, it's next round of funding. I wanted to cover some math, some calculation here. Again, not very fancy, nothing very difficult. I want to keep everybody engaged. So don't get bogged down by the numbers or the mathematics here. I'm just going to run through the logic, valuation, some simple valuation, pre-money and post-money valuation. Pre-money is, let's say if I'm an investor, I want to invest in a company like Oyo. So, but I want to know what is the worth of company. If I'm putting 1 lakh or $1 billion, how much of the ownership I'm getting and what would be the worth of the company. Whether I'm buying 1 billion and whether I'm putting $1 billion in a company which is worth 2 billion or in a company which is worth 10 billion. So let's take that simple calculation that's called pre-money valuation and post-money valuation. Pre-money is before you put the money, post-money is after you make the investments. So let's take this fictitious company. It has 1 lakh shares valued at 10 crore. So very, very nascent stage, very early stage. So the price per share becomes 10 crore divided by 1 lakh. That's 1,000 rupees per share. New funding comes in, VC round A, angel investment round B, whatever. If I am that investor, I am willing to buy 10% ownership in this company. And the valuation that I am putting here, or the valuation that I as an investor and the company management, the founders, promoters agree on, that this company is worth 15 crore actually. 10 crore was the older valuation. Now that we have built up a website, we have reached a second city from Delhi, we've moved on to Mumbai. So we have grown a bit more, our reach is further. So we are worth 15 crore now. So if you want to come in as an investor, you have to come in at this valuation and you can take up to 10% ownership. So I'm putting money here. So how will this come up as a share price valuation? Now, new valuation of the company is 15 crores. I'm buying 10%, that is 10% of 15 crores. My value of ownership is 1.5 crores. Out of the 15 crore market value, I am 10% owner. So my worth is 1.5 crores. This is how much I will have to put from my pocket at this stage if I want to purchase 10% shares, 10% ownership. I have to put 1.5 crores. How many shares will I get? After the issuance of shares, I want to have 10%, right? So 1 lakh shares were existing now. If I get, let's say 1.11 lakh, 1,11,111 shares, and I get 11,111 shares, I will be 10% owner. I will have 10% shares of the company. How do we arrive at 1 lakh divided by 0.9, right? 1 minus 10%. I guess the maths is pretty simple, so I'll not spend too much time here. So we arrive at total new shares to be issued and how many shares that I will get as a new investor. And then we arrive at a share price. Now we have 15 crores as a valuation, 1.11 lakh crores, 1 lakh shares outstanding. So 15 lakh by 1.11 lakh shares, or 1.5 crore divided by 0.11 lakh, 11,000 shares. That is value of my new share price. First it was 1,000 rupees. Next is 1,350 rupees. You see there is like a 350% or 35% jump in the share price just by valuation. But the valuation increased from 10 crores to 15 crores. These are the differences, or partly where this share price comes from, right? For the IPO, partly. There are different models to it. This is one way to look at it. Last funding round was done at 10 crores. This share price, this funding round valuation is this much. We have so many shares. So this is the share price that we come up with, right? Now, if we move away from math and just look at the process from Indian side, this is the process. Now we have seen how the idea starts. I have an idea. I'll pitch it to some of my friends. I don't know if you've seen that web series TVF Pictures. You sit in a bar, you sit at a coffee table, you pitch the idea to your friends, rope them as your founding partners. Get if they agree, if you are able to get it further, you reach to VC investors. Again, that series was very informative in that sense. It was factually very true to a large extent. So you reach funding rounds and it's a huge competition. It's a dog fight because there are so many people, so many young talented people coming up with ideas. It's a tough fight getting funding, but if you cross those hurdles, if you reach that stage where you're big enough to come up with an IPO, this is how the IPO process works in India, at least, right? So Zomato, when they came up with an IPO, the process actually started more than a year ago. It's not that they saw the markets are overvalued now and just decided, okay, next month we are coming with an IPO. No, it takes many quarters to reach that stage. So we start with an appointment of an investment banker or underwriter, or a merchant banker. Now notice all these stages are where we have job opportunities, right? Some of you may be joining the workforce in a couple of months or maybe next year. These are all the stages where you can be part of the investment community, the finance sector. You'll have opportunities here, either in Indian banks or in foreign banks, right? It's a worldwide phenomena. So banks like JP Morgan, Goldman, Morgan Stanley, they all have presence in India. So they have these operations happening in India. Even Citibank has. So the company starts with appointment of an investment banker or underwriter. What they do is they will underwrite, as the name suggests, the IPO. Meaning they will take on the risk. They will do all the brunt work. They will appoint the registrar. They will appoint the people who do all the legal work, get the paperwork done, talk with the bureaus, talk with the regulators, stock exchanges, everything. That's their responsibility primarily. Another role that they have to play is the valuation part. Whether we will offer shares at 70 rupees or 100 rupees or 700 rupees, that is decided by these guys. And the risk that they have is they have to underwrite the issue. So if, let's say, Zomato issue was not fully subscribed, and by subscription we mean people did not buy, most of the people did not believe the shares were worth 70 rupees. So maybe, they issued 1 lakh shares in market, but only 90,000 people were willing to buy it. So 90,000 shares got subscribed. Rest 10,000 were not subscribed. Nobody was willing to buy at that valuation. So 10,000 shares had no buyers. In that stage, underwriters have to buy in those 5%, 10% shares. There's a limit to which they can buy. If maybe more than 10% shares go unsubscribed, then the IPO is called to be a fail. Most of the IPOs don't reach that stage. They get a hint of whether this IPO will be successful or not before that. Now we have anchor investors, we have qualified institutional buyers, QIBs, who are roped in before the IPO goes in, because it's a very, very lengthy process. It's a very time consuming process, costly process. And if your IPO fails, it creates a bad reputation. Next time, if you try to come in the market with an IPO, let's say 1 year, 2 year down the line, when you think you're at a better position, or you reduce your share price, it is going to be a disaster. So you don't want to reach a stage where your IPO is failed. So you take care of it in these stages. We'll see how that is done. So once this is done, you register for an IPO with the regulator. In India, it is SEBI, Securities and Exchange Board. In US, it is SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission. So you register for the IPO and you also apply with the stock exchange. Stock exchanges are NSE, BSE in India, or NYSE, NASDAQ in US. At this registration stage, you come up with a DRHP, Draft Red Herring Prospectus. What that DRHP is, it basically is a document, many hundreds of pages documents, where you call out the risk of the business, who are the investors, what does the company do, what is the company going to do with the money, what is the current capital structure, and any material risk, anything material that the investor needs to know to take an informed decision. The DRHP or RHP, once it gets finalized, the draft becomes final. So DRHP becomes RHP. Zomato RHP was 402 pages. If you are interested enough, you will go through all the 400 pages. But company can always say, hey, we have put this in the RHP. If you think the company is not worth it, if you think something is not wrong, you should have read that. So once you're supposed to do your research, and this RHP could be filed, DRHP rather, could be filed up to 3 years in advance in India. Zomato could have filed for a DRHP in 2018, and they can come up with an IPO anytime in the next 3 years, anytime. So that's how companies who could not come up with an IPO in 2020 are coming up with it now. So once this is done, then you create a buzz. Creating this buzz, basically doing road shows. In the earlier times, we had companies, the investment bankers, merchant bankers, actually doing this on the road. If you have gone through World War II literature, America, the US, Allied forces, America, Australia, to some extent, UK, France, the Allied forces raised war bonds for World War II, and the pamphlets were actually distributed on the roads. When people bought the war bonds, it was actually government coming up with an IPO process of their debt, of the money that they required for going to the war, right? And it was marketed like you're contributing to the nation's safety and you're being a responsible citizen if you purchase those bonds. Now, in this stage, the companies are free to rope in some anchor investors. They can offer up to 50%. In India, it is 50%. A QIB or an anchor investor, qualified institutional buyer. These are mutual funds, pension funds, maybe retirement funds, insurance companies like LIC and stuff. they can subscribe to these IPOs they can subscribe to the shares before it goes to an IPO. So if I can confirm with, let's say, LIC to purchase 50% of my shares before it even goes to IPO, I know my 50% is secured. 50% shares will have a buyer. Rest 15 to 20% could be offered to mutual funds and other institutional buyers, DIIs as they are called, domestic institutional investors, and up to 35% could be offered to retail investors like you and me. You apply for an IPO, so only 35% could be offered, and that is usually the uh, you know, open part, because you can't reach out to people, retail investors in advance. That is what happens in the IPO stage. That is the uh, risky part, whether 35% will be subscribed or not. But you have to open at least 10%. You have to keep at least 10% for the retail investors. So you can't have 100% allocated to all these institutions and say we have come up with an IPO. If retail investors cannot be part of it, then it's not an IPO. You're not getting publicly listed. After that is done, we have book building issue. We are coming with at this stage, we only have a valuation, right? We know company is worth 15,000 crore or 5 crores. We don't know what would be the share price for each share. That is done in book building issue. It could be a fixed price. It could be a book building in fixed price. As the name suggests, you have fixed. It's a 70 rupees per share or 700 rupees per share. Book building usually has a range, not 20% up or down. And most of the IPOs that we see in offered to public are in this book building issue. So you will have a price band, maybe 70 to 75 rupees, and you can apply for an IPO within that band. So that is the book building stage. Then it is open for public. Once this is decided, then it is open for public. You will see the listing getting done on Zerodha, Upstocks, ICICI Direct, HDFC Securities, and so on. And when I apply for an IPO as a retail investor, I am applying it through ASBA account, ASBA. Now, ASBA account is application secured by booked amount, or that I can't recollect what the B stands for. It basically it gives right to your company to block that money in your bank account. Now, the company is not getting money at this stage when you are subscribing to it. The company will get money in their account only when the shares are allocated. Right? So when you see oversubscription, you see there are maybe 100 shares were on the offer, but 200 people came in to buy. So issue was oversubscribed by 100%. So rest only 100 people will get it, obviously. So shares will be allocated to 100 people. Rest 100 people will have their money returned. So company will be getting money only from the 100 people for 100 shares. Rest of the money will be returned from this ASBA account. Not something that we have to do. Your booker is capable to take care of this. We just have to allocate money from our own, just few clicks. It's a part of the process. Once this allocation is done, money is returned in maybe a week or so. The listing is done, and then after the listing date, it trades in the market just like any other share. Right? Couple of interesting terms. You might have heard of these before. If you've not, we'll just cover them up in this section. We've seen what DRHP is, what ASBA account is. Anchor investor, we have seen that. Green shoe option is if the issue gets oversubscribed, the merchant banker, investment banker, or the company has an option to issue additional shares, maybe 5% additional shares, 10% additional shares at the same price, cut-off price, so that we can meet the demand. Because there's more demand, obviously more people think that it is worth 70 rupees or more, 80 rupees or more. So issue option is when you more shares after the applications have come in. Without this option, you have to fix up how many shares you on the market at the initial stage, at the DRHP stage. Now this is interesting term, gray market premium. How many of us have heard of this term, gray market premium? Can we have a show of hands? Okay, good. Now, gray market premium, as it's not a black market as we can see from the name. It's somewhere between the white, the listing stage, listing market, legal market, and the unofficial market, which is done off the books. Now, what happens is if I apply for the shares, if I apply for an IPO, I don't know at the stage that whether I'm going to get the shares allocated or not, right? Even after the shares are allocated to me, let's say issues open from 1st to 3rd of the month, I apply for it, and the allocation is going to happen on, let's say, 8th. So between 3rd to 8th of the month, I don't know whether I'm going to get the shares or not, right? But I have applied. And as a retail investor, I can apply only up till 1 lakh or 50,000, depends on issue to issue. But I can only apply to certain limit. If I want my chances to increase, what makes sense is I apply from my mother's account, from my wife's account, from my father's account, from my children's account. More applications I have, it's like a lottery ticket, right? You buy a lottery, more tickets you buy, higher the chances to get the lottery. But even after on 8, let's say I have applied through 5 accounts, I get allocation in one. Even at that stage, I don't know whether the application, so let's say the share price was 100 rupees, whether listing would happen at 110 so that it's getting listed at premium and I'm at profit from day one, or the listing happens at 80 rupees and I am at loss, 20 rupees lost on the day one, right? We don't know that until it actually gets listed. This is where the gray market premium, or it's also called as Kostak book, if you've heard of that term from our Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati, Marwadi terms, languages. Kostak is where you put your accounts. So gray market premium is before the allocation. I can, let's say 5 of us have applied. I have 5 names in my screen. Let's say Yash, Shreyasi, Prachi, and Dia have applied. Nobody knows before 8th whether they're going to get allocation or not. I want to increase my chances, so I'll reach out to Yash, Shreyasi, and Dia to give them to make a deal that, you know what, if you get allocation, if you get allocated, uh, you'll give it to me. And I will buy those shares from you at a fixed price. And what would be that price? Pretty higher than the market price, higher IPO price. IPO is at 100. I'll buy it from you at say 105. Right? So that is one rate. Other is after the 8th. I know shares have been allocated, but the IPO as listing has yet to happen. So I don't know whether it will get listed on 110 or 90 or 80 or 150. So I will come and say, hey, you've got the allocation. We don't know what the price is going to be. 10, 115, 120. Let's close the deal. I'm taking out all the risk that you have. So I'll give you 120. Whatever is the listing price, whatever upside is mine to keep. That is a gray market premium. The mood of investors is unofficially gauged from gray market premium. If this is high, we can say the issue is going to be successful and may list at premium in the market. So we can subscribe it. It's up to 2 weeks earlier. This gray market premium starts building. Right. So these are some terms. I know this is very theoretical, may not be very interesting at this stage. We'll come to something which is more interesting, maybe that has created some buzz, which is valuation. I'll try to keep it practical, very short. Not want to bore you much. We have 4 basic approaches to valuation. Whether the share price should be 100 rupees or 10,000. The MRF share was one of the costliest shares in India. And we have penny stocks, which are like couple of. How do we value it? It's not just shares, any asset, right? Anything that you have to buy, whether it's a house or those Pokemon cards. How do we value them? There are 4 basic approaches: asset approach, income approach, market approach, and other approaches clubbed together in one category. What is asset approach? Just seen in mutual funds, REITs, housing projects. We have an NAV, net asset value, or net realizable value. replacement cost, something very illiquid. So if a company is a private company, it's undergoing liquidation, right? We had Ruchi Soya, one of the recent examples, right? Undergoing liquidation, and they were bankrupt. The banks invited other companies to buy out their, this company so that they could get their money returned. What they did was, or how the bank would look at it is, how much money would I get if I sell the assets? If you have a manufacturing company, if you have an airline company, you have asset heavy companies, you can sell off the asset and that could be your price of company. There is no premium. You're not considering future growth here. You look at what is the worth now. Today's date, what is the worth of it? So that is the net realizable value today, or how much would it cost to create a company of this scale today. No, let's say we have this uh, a real estate project coming in next to our building. What is the worth of that project is, if I have to create a, let's say, Hiranandani complex today, if I have to buy the land in such an area, I have to create such an infrastructure to create these, build those buildings and the parking spaces and the shop spaces and everything, how much would it cost me? That is the replacement value. Very crude and not really useful, especially in a liquid market. Doesn't really consider everything. So we move on to next stage, which is income approach. Income approach is, how much is this asset worth to me considering future growth, right? You buy a let's say a retirement policy, a pension fund. Your father would have thought about it at some point of time, or they will think about it at some point of time. You are buying an asset that is going to give you money in future. So you're looking at the free cash flows from this particular company and discounting them. DCF, one of the very commonly used approaches in valuation of companies. You're looking at what are the free cash flows from the company, how much is the money left after it pays off everybody. Right? It pays off taxes, it pays off expenses, it pays off suppliers, it pays off debt. This is the money left after end of every year, the next 5, 10, 15, 100 years. What is the present value of that cash flow each year? Today, that is the value of my company. Very suitable in case of predictable cash flow companies, steady companies, or bonds, those fixed income securities where you have coupon payments, interest payments every quarter, every year. So you can come up with these uh, discounted cash flows. In case of housing property, let's say you're purchasing a warehouse, or buying a house in investment, for investment purpose, you're going to collect rent. You're not going to stay there. You're going to collect rent from it. What you can calculate, what is the expected rent in that locality over the next 10 years. What would be the price of the house in that locality after 10 years? So you can sell it off. So you have the cash flows laid out and you're trying to calculate today's price. In real estate, we also have some capitalization rates. So industry experts have done research and they have come up with different types of properties. Let's say a warehouse type of property in uh, New Bombay area, right? Or some area, Bhiwandi area, where we have a lot of warehouses. There is a rate, maybe 5 times, 10 times your monthly rental income or annual rental income. That is your value of property. That is the income approach, capitalization of earnings method. Next is the market approach. Obviously, this is applicable for securities which are traded in the market, the stocks, common equities that we see. Or in case of housing properties, you purchase a house in a particular housing complex, you look at what was the price at which other house was sold last month, right? What was the price of a particular area? If you're building a land or building a house on your own, how much was per square feet rate for a building or a land in neighborhood? That will give you some idea about what is the market price of a house or a land in that particular neighborhood, right? In case of private companies, if let's say Zomato is trying to buy out a smaller player, much was the price paid for that particular type of company, a private transaction that happened in last year. That gives some idea about what would be the price that should be paid this year. These are comparable transactions or comparable market multiple. We have these other market multiples like uh, EV by EBITDA rate, P rate, P multiple, EV by EBITDA multiple, right? We have something like sales multiple, companies that are not making profit yet, sales multiple approach, right? Profits multiple approach. Or in case of social networking kind of sites, let's say a Facebook kind of site or Twitter kind of site, how many users, active users per month or per day, per week, number of times, 10 times the number of active users, that is my value of the company. So if Twitter gets sold for 10 times average monthly active users, maybe Instagram could also be sold around that multiple, right? 10 times the active users over a month. Those are the market multiples. Then we have other approaches, recent funding rounds. We saw the pre-money, post-money approach, and we have a discount approach. This is not used very commonly, Gordon growth model or discount model, which is basically looking at the company is worth the dividend it pays in future. An older approach, think about the railroads or utility companies which have no huge ups and downs, but ITC kind of company, they just keep giving dividend year over year. So their value of the company is how much dividend we expect to get every year. There are other two discounts or premiums that are charged for liquidity and control. Liquidity premium is if your company is not getting listed on stock. If I'm investing in private company, then obviously I'm going to pay less because I can't sell. I'm taking some risk of illiquidity. So that is the liquidity premium. Difference between a similar company which is listed, a public listed, a liquid company versus a private unlisted illiquid company. Control premium or control discount is what is the amount of ownership I'm getting. If I'm getting maybe 0.1%, 0.2% shares of total ownership, there's no control in the company. If I'm getting 20% shares in the company, I'm gaining control over the company. I'm going to have some weight in decision making. I'm going to probably have a representative on the board of directors. So I'm okay to pay a bit of a premium than the market price. That's a control premium. Or if you don't have that, you have discount, right? This is the general approach to valuations, right? Kind of dry, theoretical. I know. Let's look at a live example, which is Zomato, right? And I'm not going to spend too much of time on this, keeping the time constraint in mind. But this material is available. I can share this particular sheet with you. This is the model that we have. I'll walk you through it in a very, very brief detail. I'm just going to look at some important concepts, right? When you are looking at a Zomato as a valuation, you're looking at a discounted cash flow approach. This is the discounted cash flow approach. Because any company, we might value real estate or we might value art with what are the values in the eyes of beholder. But any company, business is not a collection, right? Business is not something that you collect and keep in museum or you put in your gallery to entertain people when they come, with your entertain your guests. Right? Business is something that you want to earn money from. So business is only worth the money that it can get you. You can get the IPO, apply for IPO, get it, and on the first day when it goes public, you can get the listing gains and exit. That's the money you will get. Or you can stay invested for a couple of years, let the company grow, let your shares or value also grow, and exit also a couple of years. Basically, businesses, the most conservative approach is business is worth the money it can generate. As simple as that. You might buy a business for any amount of time, but if it's not getting any money, it's not worth anything. if the business can't give you a profit, then there should be some buyer who thinks that business is worth a lot more and you should be able to sell them, and that way you can recover your money. But it has to give you money. So there are some assumptions we come up with. We are doing Zomato valuations. This is not my sheet, to be honest with you. This is not work I have done from scratch. I've built up on a model that is available. This is a model built up by Ashwath Damodaran. I see some heads nodding, so I'm assuming that some of us have heard of it. If you've not, you should Google this name. He's a professor in, I think, NYU Stern College, a veteran in valuations and corporate finance. He has done a lot of, he teaches corporate finance in this college, but he has also made a lot of material, a lot of research available to the public. He has revolutionized some of the concepts, the ways we look at risk-free rate, WACC, discount premiums, and all those things. This is the name. If you in your some brownie point, but you have to know what you're talking about. But something that you can really look up, his website, his blog is free to public, so you can there as well. So what the model takes us is looking at the industry. Now Zomato, as you know, it's not a traditional business model. It's the share of that market. So if you look at the Indian food delivery market, it is not the restaurants. Food delivery market. Ordering and buying food from home, from your right. We in 90 then in early 2000 we moved to websites. If you had a website that gives you legitimacy and gives you some premium, then we moved to apps. Now we are in the apps zone of the digital age. If you have an app, if you have a company, digital company, you need to have app. Otherwise, you don't work, because fees for food delivery. But Google Pay, Paytm, these guys don't charge fees for their delivery, for their services. So where they are getting money from? They're getting money from the data that they collect from our phones, from our behavior, from our usage. And that data is collected best if they have an app on our phone that collects everything, all such data. Nothing to be surprised. We have given them consents when they installed the apps, when they signed up for their services. Amazon has done it. Amazon, Google, they do it. And even the smallest apps, they do it. TikTok does it. And those lot of Chinese apps also do it. That's why we had to ban them. Now the data is invaluable. So that's,
sorry to interrupt, but can you please tell the site and the teacher's
Yeah.
name, please?
I will share that, right? I'll type it out. It's the person's name is Ashwath Damodaram. I'll share the details after this. Maybe I can share the slides also.
Okay, sir. Sorry to disturb you.
Right. That's right. So we are looking at the growth in Indian food delivery market. This approach is uniform for any company that you want to value, right? Any company that you're using DCF model for valuation, this is the same approach. You may not have the market share part. You will directly move to the the growth of that company. If you already know it's a well-established business model. For example, if you're looking at ITC, the Indian Tobacco Company, which sells cigarettes and some FMCG products, you don't need to think about what is the market for tobacco products or cigarettes. You can simply extrapolate the growth of the company. It's been in market for 150 years. So you have some long-term growth here. In case of new companies, you cannot have a long-term growth. So you have growth for next 2 to 5 years, 6 to 10 years, and a long-term growth after 10 years. So you can see Indian food market, food delivery market is expected. These are the current values, 225 million or 225,000. Let's not look at the units for a moment. Let's look at the percentages rather than absolute numbers. Next 2 to 5 years is expected to grow by 30% every year. After that, 6 to 10 years, 15%, which is quite understandable. And you cannot have this exponential growth for longer period of time. And after 10 years, it might reach, after these 10 years of growth, this 225 million market will reach 1.9 billion. This is your market estimate. You can vet this, you can have your own assumptions, you can look at NASSCOM's data, you can look at industry data. There's a lot of research material available, so you can have your own estimates. For Zomato, we are looking at what is the share of this of this company in the market. Largest is Zomato with 40% share. We have Swiggy and Amazon Eats, which is venturing next, second and third biggest player. Uber Eats was kind of taken over by Zomato, so that's no longer in the competition. And Zomato has had acquisitions, a lot of acquisitions in last 5 to 7 years. A lot of growth has come from acquisitions. So this is the gross order value, revenues from gross order value, as revenues as a percentage of gross order value. This is the interesting part, right? Revenues. This is our estimate for next 10 years of what would be the revenue. Then we come up with a profit margin or operating margin. Last year it had 24% loss. Next year it is expecting to have a 10% loss. After that, at the end of 10 years, or rather at the end of 7 years actually, it expects to reach a 35% operating margin after break even and everything. Amazon reached break even 3 years after it got listed. So it's not unusual to see it. Tesla also got profitable, reached break even, I think after 2 to 3 years after it got listed. So it's not new. So you arrive at a operating profit margin, you deduct tax payments, you look at the reinvestments in the business. So what is the rate at which the business is going to grow? And you arrive at a return on capital and return on investment. In your textbook, this would be replaced by WACC. Now, WACC is your weighted average cost of capital, which would be your discount rate. The fundamental aspect to think here is we are trying to estimate the cash flows. Cash flows are not net profits, right? Cash flows are what is the money left after it pays off all the expenses to investors. Free cash flows. It could be inclusive of the interest payment. The firm includes debt holders and equity holders. Depends on which angle you're taking. If you're calculating the equity value, then you will only look at the profits after debt has been paid off. If you're looking at total capital, debt plus equity, then you'll consider the interest payment as a part of your total cash flows. Right? I don't want to get into the nuances at this stage, but the core concept of what you're going to do here, I think at this stage it's safe to open the Excel model. Let me see if I can share that on the screen. Right. I hope you can see this one.
Yes.
So this is
Yes,
what we're
Chandra, it is
doing.
visible.
Okay. So we are actually arriving at the cash flows, free cash flows to firm, FCFF, for next 10 years. Looking at the growth rate. This is the market growth rate, growing at 50% next year, but will sooner or later reach at a stable growth rate of 9% to 4.5%. Now, this is a very, very conservative approach. At conservative estimate, only 4% growth every year, which is the long-term growth in FMCG market for India. So this is the speed at which market will grow. This is the size at which the market will grow. This is the market share. Zomato supposed to be stabilized at 40%, slightly above 42%. So again, the approach is very, very, very conservative. Right? After 10th year, we are assuming that there is no exponential growth rate. So we'll grow at only 4.25% after that. This is a terminal year growth rate, terminal growth rate. We don't do it after more than 10 years usually. We are calculating revenues with the same approach. Revenue as a percentage of gross order value. I think you can see the logical flow between these terms, right? The market will be at, let's say, 1 lakh crores in say 1.8 lakhs crores in year 10. Out of that, Zomato has 40% share. So the gross order value of food or deliveries from Zomato would be 707 lakh 50,000 crores, out of which now 22% is the fees that Zomato charges for the food that you order from their site. So if I order food worth 1,000 rupees, 220 rupees or 22% is Zomato's revenue. Rest 78% is the food delivery partner, the restaurant's revenue rather. So revenue for Zomato is 22%, which turns out to be this one, right? Out of that, profit margin is, let's say, now it is minus 24%, but it is expected to be 35% at the end of 10 years, which is reasonable, not very high, not very aggressive. So this is my EBIT or operating income. Then I'm calculating, I'm subtracting the tax rate. I'm adding back this amount as reinvestment, a part of that amount, because in order to keep the company growing at this stage exponentially, I have to keep reinvesting in the company, right? So this is my reinvestment. After I reinvest the money, how much is the cash remaining, cash left for the equity holders to take out in the form of dividends or just to keep it as a reserve? This is my estimation for free cash flows for next 10 years. Right? You can see it starts negative. It is negative at this stage. And somewhere in 5th year, it is turning positive. 4th or 5th year, it is turning positive, right? From minus 100 crores to plus 4,400 crores. And after that, it is supposed to be profitable. Terminal value is 27,000 crores. Let's not look at the units here. Cost of capital, usually WACC, or it could be expected returns. You can calculate from CAPM model. I'm sure not every one of us heard of the CAPM model, but it is just the expected return that any investor would expect on their investment in this company. When you invest in post office funds, you expect a 7% return, right? When you buy, let's say, government bonds, you expect a 6% return. But if you buy, let's say, Reliance shares, you don't want 6%, 7% returns. You want at least 10 to 12% returns per year, average, right? Because if you wanted 6%, you could have just bought government bonds, which are much more, much less risky, much safer investment. So that is the expected rate of return. A proxy for that, it could be any other proxy also, but it's a discount rate. So you discount the annual cash flows in the future with this particular cost of capital to arrive at present value of the free cash flows. So the present value, sum of present value, NPV, net present value of all the losses that you're making in next 4 years, plus all the profits that are made in the future 6 year onwards, is this much, right? So total PV, net present value of the 10 years plus the terminal year, everything is this much. You're also considering some probability of failure, safety or margin that we talked about earlier, because we know no matter how conservative we are, we can still fail. We can still consider some risks that were not conceptualized at the beginning. Subtract for debt portions, what are loans that the company has, minority interest and everything, the proceeds from IPO, non-operating assets. So whatever is left is equity holders' share. Before the before the equity holders can have their claims, everybody else has to be paid off. Debt holders have to be paid off, right? The reinvestments have to be done. The people who have minority interest, they need to be paid off. So based on this is the price as per this model, Ashwath Damodaran's model, around 41 rupees. Number of shares is what the company has already declared. Expected share, expected value, very, very conservatively, right? Price IPO was 70, so it was overvalued at 171 rupees by a very conservative approach. Obviously, if you are building a model, you can have maybe 6% terminal growth rate, that would change the model altogether. You can have maybe lower reinvestment, you can have a lower tax rate, depending upon what kind of assets you have. Gross order value, you change estimates, change. You might take out probability of failure altogether, or you might increase it, is going to change. This is how we come up with risk. And this is my price, right? I think it's $40, it's getting offered at $70. I may not subscribe. If you think, if your price is $80, 80, or sorry, 80 rupees, and it is getting offered at 70 rupees, you might subscribe, right? Or if you don't have this calculation, if you just believe on the story, then you're just buying artwork. You're not buying a business if you're not doing your research, right? So this is a general background about the IPOs that we have, the valuation approaches that we have, and general approach to valuation from Zomato example. I hope you found this interesting. Could be pretty
Yeah,
dry for this topic.
no, sorry to
So can
interrupt,
we?
Chinmay, but it was really, I mean,
Yeah.
the entire thing was really informative, and I'm sure a lot of students have really enjoyed the session and have a lot to take back from the session. But so since we were planning to close at 6:30, on that note, I'd like to ask you, can we move on to the question answer sessions now?
Yeah, absolutely. So this whatever I had to share with you, I'm done.
All right.
Now, any questions at this stage?
All right, great. So I think Khushi, Prachi, the people responsible, the host responsible for the question answer round, can continue.
So here's the first question. Investing in IPO is much less riskier than directly investing in stock market. Is that true?
Okay, investing in IPOs versus investing in stock market, which are all listed already. Right. Is that the comparison we are having?
Yes.
Okay, no, I would not say so, because when we look at the big building issue, if you go through the process, you would notice even if Zomato thinks that their shares are worth 70 rupees, until and unless the larger market thinks the same way, that it is 70 or more, it is not worth, right? It could be worth less if larger market believes that it's only worth 60 rupees, for example. Then on the listing day, you will not have, you will have a loss of 10 rupees straight away. First of all, you cannot invest in IPO as a short thing. You can only apply for it, and then it's basically a luck-based process. It's like buying a lottery ticket, whether you get allocated or not. It's purely random, anonymized. So there's no way you can assure that you get listed, you get part of that IPO. But even if you do get allocated, you don't know what is the listing price. Fortunately, we have seen IPOs which are getting listed at 50% premium, 100% premium, 110% premium, not just the tech IPOs, right? We've had at least half a dozen IPOs in last quarter. Almost all of them have been listed, listed at a premium. So it might appear that it's a very profitable conjunction, but it's the probability of getting that successful IPO is low. A more stable risk-averse approach would be buying direct equity. Stable, known kind of businesses, stable businesses.
Sir, I'm Pranav. Good evening, first of all. Sir, I just wanted to ask that you told us there are 4 valuation methods, and how to apply that method. Like we need to choose a certain way, or we can apply any one of them and we'll get the same results. Then how, if we need to choose, then what are the things that eligibility or something else that we need to cover up for a certain method?
Right. So first of all, you will not get the same answer if you choose different method. Okay. In fact, if you and I use the same method, we will arrive at a different answer.
Okay.
And that's why I said 2 + 2 is not always 4.
Okay.
It depends on what estimates you have. Like in the Zomato case, if your terminal growth rate was 5% and mine was 4%, you will get different prices.
Yes.
So the inputs that you have had, the assumptions that you're making, make a great deal of difference on what value you get. Now, coming to which method to start with,
Yeah.
it depends on what kind of company, what kind of asset you're valuing.
Okay.
If you're valuing a
An
company,
IPO.
right,
Yeah.
general company, an IPO, for example,
Okay.
which has a stable business,
Yeah.
which has generated profits.
Okay.
If you can predict the future cash flows, then DCF valuation, discounted cash flow valuation, the example that we saw for Zomato would be the best one to do it.
Okay. Okay.
And this is only if you don't have the market price available, or if you want to do your own research. Value of any stock or price of any stock is what you pay in the stock exchange. Right? If Zomato share is being traded at 110 rupees today,
Yes.
it is worth 110 rupees. Because you might come up with a 40 rupees price in your model, but if the larger market does not agree with it, then you're just on the wrong side of it. You may be accurate with your predictions, but
Okay. Does financial modeling helps in IPO valuation? A small question.
yes, it definitely helps not only in IPO valuation, but also in your personal investing. Right? Even
Okay.
if I'm buying, let's say, ITC shares or Reliance shares, just
Okay.
because everybody believes that Reliance Jio is going to be a big hit, a massive thing, it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be. I can have my own assumptions. I can build out the same model like we had for Zomato. It doesn't have to be so sophisticated to be a very crude model as well, but I can have my own assumptions. I can have my safety of margin. Not
Okay.
everybody has equal safety of margin, and then we'll have prices. So that is the most useful method, discounted cash flow. If you have cash flows available, if you're looking at real estate kind of values, they are done at a capitalization rate or comparable deals rate. No,
Okay.
similar type of property was sold for 1 crore last year.
Yeah.
So now we can say,
Okay.
my house is slightly bigger. It is on the higher floor. Plus, it's 1 year since last deal was done.
That,
So maybe I can
that
have
are
1
the
crore
factors that
10
are to
lakh
be
for
considered for a real estate valuation, right?
yeah. So they are company specific, industry specific, your asset
Okay.
specific.
Okay. Thank you.
And I think we have one question for Adani Green. What is the approach that we can use? Current market price 882, book value is 11 rupees. Okay, interesting point that came up now. Now, book value is often very low than the market value. Right? Book value is something that the it's an accounting thing, right? There is no book value for equity as such in practical terms. Book value is just the accounting entry that the company makes in their books in accounting terms, right? They have the value of assets. The way book value is derived at is you have your value of assets, then you have your value of liabilities. We know equity is equal to assets minus liability. So whatever your equity value, you divide that by total number of shares, and you have your book value. So obviously your asset price is not considering the value of your assets, how much property you have, what is the machinery that is you're carrying, what is the cost of that machinery. It is not considering your future growth. So it will only consider maybe what you can achieve, what you can get if you sell off the assets and wind up the company today or close to that. Market price is what the market participants, investors, people like you and me, people like mutual fund managers believe that would be realized considering future growth, considering uh, the potential for the market. Now, Adani Green again is a very speculative kind of project, just like Zomato. Not because its cash flows are uncertain, but the whole market is uncertain. We don't know when the market will be ready to get that green energy kind of thing. The petrochemical lobby is very strong yet. So it's still an idea stage, but we can use the same DCF model for valuing Adani Green as well. But we'll have to use that safety of margin or probability of failure with a very, very prudent and conservative approach. Maybe for ITC, I don't need to use the probability of failure. For Reliance, I can't imagine how Reliance could fail in the next 10 years. So I don't need to use that probability of failure or safety margin at least as a high number. But for Adani Green, I will use that. For Zomato, I will use that discount.
So there's another question. How merchant bankers decide the quotas for like retail investors or institutional investors?
Okay, no, this quota, this allocation is fixed by our regulators. It's fixed by SEBI and called out under Companies Act. In fact, most of the regulations related to IPO proceedings are covered under Companies Act, which was revised, I think, a couple of years earlier. We have up to 35% for retail investors, up to 50% for anchor investors, and up to 15% for DIIs, other institutional investors. But when we say up to, we can obviously change these percentage. In that zone, we can have less percentage allocated for equity for retail investors.
Thank you, sir.
Right. Just one thing, for Zomato or for any company which is in loss, which is not making profits as of the IPO date, the SEBI has changed this limit to up to 10%, not 35%, because SEBI realizes Zomato could be just driven by hype. Retail investors not purely aware of the risk in the business. They might just invest on the frenzy. So the allocation is quite less for loss-making businesses for IPOs.
So one last question, if we can take it. So
Yeah, sure.
what should be the, sorry. Yeah.
Sorry,
So the question is, how does a person gather capital who has adequate knowledge and skills to make investments but doesn't have capital to commence with?
Start with friends and family. So are you talking about investing in share market like a Warren Buffett or Jhunjhunwala type of investment, or are you talking for startup?
So any of that. Like, how do I start if I don't even have a capital to do that, but I have the skills and knowledge to do it?
Okay, so I guess in that stage, if you don't have a business model of your own, if you just want to trade in share market, then you have to start small, to borrow from people who will not charge interest. Right? Will be happy to give it to you, friends, family, parents, in-laws if you have them. Do not borrow it from bank and pay interest on it. That's totally wrong way to do it. Start small and build up. Right? Most of the stories that we hear about the successful investors, from Jhunjhunwala to Warren Buffett, they started with couple of thousand rupees, couple of lakh rupees. If you have an idea and if you want to build up a business, right, a Zomato or a Paytm kind of thing, again you start with the borrowed, the friends and family funds, and then you pitch it to those forums, the venture capital forums, the other PE forums. They have forums for these startups, right? The eCell forums, Government India has some allocations. Then you pitch it to these guys. You'll find the resources from your college or from, you can just Google for these resources. There are many platforms. You pitch for them and they will be willing to invest this one. I think we had some comment in chat. Case totally opposite to Adani Green is Eclid investment, CMP 16 rupees and book value is just about 3 lakh rupees. Can you elaborate on this one? I'm not sure what you are trying to say here. Are you saying the market price for that particular stock is less than the book value? Yeah. Okay, so market price is 16 rupees, but book value is 3.5. Now here, in this particular case, if I remember correctly, this particular stock is not traded. When it is listed, if I remember, and I'll do like at a specific case, but it is not traded. if you try to put a order for this particular share at 16 rupees or 17 rupees, right? Yeah, traded 1 year ago. Right? So people who have that know that their value of their share is not 60 rupees, it is 3.5 lakh. So nobody's willing to sell at this price. Just when the price that we see last year that happening, that could be a one-off thing, or it could be an related party transaction. That's why we see that price. You will not be able to buy it at this price. Right. Any questions? That's fine. See, even if you have very silly sounding question, it is fine. I did not know half of the stuff that I have mentioned here when I was in college. I didn't know what an IPO is, what an IPO, FPO was when I was in college. So it is fine if you have to ask any silly questions which you think is silly. It's just fine. We are all at the same stage here. Or if you're not comfortable sharing here, I will have my contact details shared with the team. You can reach out to me separately after the session.
Thank you so much, sir. We never really thought that the questions which were engraved in our minds for such a long time would be finally answered in a logical and a profound way. Since so many IPOs are lined up this year, I think we are ready to apply the knowledge we have gained today and analyze the future IPOs. With this, we come to the end of this masterclass. It was really amazing. I would like to express my appreciation to Mr. Chinmay Ngole on behalf of HR College for his valuable lesson on IPO valuation, and we are immensely grateful to you for having spared time with us. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, team. And I appreciate having stayed here till the end of the session. I know it was not because we didn't have anything else to do. The public places are open. We have a lot of entertainment on our mobile. So if you stayed till the end, that's really congratulations to you too.
Thank you
I
so
think,
much.
Chinmay, to that note, I'd just like to add, we're extremely sorry for the last minute changes that happened, but at the same time, we're really grateful for this very informative session. And I'd like to thank all participants as well for being a part of this session. And so that's it. I mean, looking forward to hearing from you soon, Chinmay. We would love to have you on board again. And thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, sure. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right.
Thank you
Goodbye.
so much.